Alright, let's talk about editing. The first thing I want you to understand is that editing is actually an extension of your creative process. The moment you visualize that photo, the moment you saw that image appear in the street or wherever you were, the moment you captured it, you had a very specific image in mind. Now, when you captured it, maybe you didn't get the result you expected, and this is where editing will be amazing. Because editing will extend your vision and it will make sure that you apply it correctly, that the photo you took really comes out the way you imagined it in your mind. So remember, whatever you're doing when you're editing, it's all about bringing back that attention to your subject, to your story, really bringing that story to life and enhancing it through artificial methods in your editing process. There are a bunch of ways you can be editing, there are a bunch of techniques. Now, for today, I want to concentrate on the basics. And you might remember that photo right here from India. We talked about it, we talked about how I shot it, and this is the edited version, this is non-edited version. And I want to show you that difference because a bad photo, as I mentioned, although you might edit it as much as you can, is not gonna turn out great. But a photo that is good or great, if you edit it properly, it's gonna pop, it's gonna be beautiful. So that's an example. So we're going to do the basic edits on that one for today, and then tomorrow I will show you how to go really in depth and really use all the tools that you have to bring that attention to your subject. So what is the first thing you want to be thinking about when you're going to be editing? First, you need to go in with a vision. Just like when you're taking photos, you want to understand what you're trying to do. So here, I remember the story, that woman, daily scene in India, that woman's walking down with a bucket. I don't know what she's been doing. She's been cleaning, she's been working on something. Well, I want to bring some attention to my subject over here. I want to bring out a lot of light and colors because India is colorful. It's very vibrant. So the first thing I'm going to do is make sure my white balance was correct. If you're editing with the wrong white balance, it's going to, everything's gonna look terrible. So you see, if you were too cool, that would look like everything's blue. And then if you're too warm, it looks actually way, yeah, too warm. So I think for this scene, we can see that she's lit a little bit in the shade, but we also have some direct light. Now you have an artistic choice. You can either go cooler, like right now, or you can go for something like cloudy. It's gonna bring out a lot of warmth in the tones. Well, I don't really like it right now because I think it's gonna be too much. So I'm gonna go to daylight. You can choose the white balance. You can choose it because you shot in RAW. You can actually choose as shot, auto, daylight, cloudy, shade, tungsten, however you want, or you can slide it left and right and decide on what you want. So I kind of like it in daylight. As shot was 5000 kelvins that you can read right here, and now daylight is 5500. It's a little bit warmer, I like it. The second thing that you want to be tweaking is your exposure. Now why the exposure? Simply because if you apply presets, if you work on the tone curves, etc., you want to make sure that you have a good exposure from day one. You know, it's just like when you take the photo, you want to make sure you're exposed correctly. Sometimes I underexpose, so I want to make sure that I'm correctly exposed from the beginning. Now, when you're going to bump up that exposure, I want you to take a look here on that histogram. That histogram is going to move. As you can see here, we have a little warning. Apparently, we are clipping in the reds on the highlights. So as I mentioned before, it works like on your camera, right side, all the highlights, the blacks on the left side, and all the highlights and lights on the right side. Okay, so if I bump up the exposure, the curve goes all the way to the right. If I bump it down, it goes all the way in the blacks, and everything goes black. So here, I want to bump it up a little bit, but not too much. You can see that I'm clipping in the white right now. That triangle showed up, and I don't know where. Oh, and if you hover over it, it's going to show you where. So let's go extreme just to show you. And now you can see where on that image it is burned. So I'm gonna bring it down to plus 0.40. That looks good. It's clipping a little bit, but I don't even see it on my image. Oh, it's actually here. Look. It's here. So that's not very important. No one cares if you're clipping on that section of the image. It's not important. Okay, now your second step is tweaking the contrast. How punchy do you want that image to look? Do you want the blacks to be crushed? Do you want them not to be crushed, etc.? Here you can play around with the tone curve. Tone curve is simply a way to understand the input and the output of your image. So here's your input. Here on the left you've got black, here you've got white, and here the same, you've got the white and you've got the black here. So you want the blacks to come out black and you want the whites to come out white. Right now it's a linear curve. But what if you want to add a little bit of contrast? For example, you want to tell your software, hey, make my dark a little bit darker. And oh, look what's happening. All the darks are getting darker, all the dark pixels. And now I want to be like, oh, hey, make my white a little bit punchier. And just that, look, I just did an S-curve, which is very classical contrasted S-curve. Just that makes a big difference, right? We already did a tiny bit and we see a very big difference. It looks, for me, it looks punchier. Now, it's way too much in my opinion, so I'm gonna bring it back down a little bit. And here it's all a game of finding the right balance, you know? It's about finding what looks good to your eye, what you like, and then adjusting as you go. So I kind of like it like that. It's not too strong for now. It's gonna be great because I like to use a tone curve as a base, and then I like to move to those tone sliders over here, which are doing things a little bit differently. So here, what do I want to do? I want to actually bring a little bit of shadows out. I want to give a little bit more information as to what's happening here. So for example, in that part of the image, I'm going to bring up a little bit of shadows on the overall image. And you can see that might be too much. So I'm gonna bring it a little bit here. And what I suggest to you, whenever you're using a slider, just go left and right all the way just to see what's happening. My highlights, I can bring them down a little bit, and then my whites, I'm going to tweak them, drop them a little bit just to keep information here so it doesn't look like overexposed. And the blacks are going to, you see the blacks are acting on everything that is black in the image. So I'm gonna bring them a little bit like that. If you press the backslash on your keyboard, you can see before and after. Okay, so that's a little bit something we got here, we got going on. What I'm going to do is I'm going to bump up a little bit more my exposure. Now I've got a base I like to work with, and I'm gonna go back to my tone curve and I'm going to bring down a little bit more my contrast in the shadows right here. And also I'm gonna do something that is kind of cool, is I'm gonna kill a little bit the blacks. And you can see if you kill the blacks a lot, which means you're grabbing that point at the bottom and you're lifting it up, it makes everything faded in the black. But that's not what I want. I want it just a little bit, that's all, not too much. Next is that magic clarity slider that you have to be very careful about. It makes everything look sometimes cool, sometimes not. So you want to be careful with it. I like to add a little bit of clarity in my images. It just adds a little crispiness to it, but you have to be very careful not to do it too much. Next, vibrance. Vibrance is changing your colors, like how punchy they are. I like to increase my vibrance to make it a little bit more punchy in my image, yet I like to drop the saturation a little bit. It's something that I've experienced a lot with, that I like the way it looks after. Now, you want to come to something we call the HSL slider. And just to show you how far we went right now, this is our before, this is our after. I think it looks great. Now, I do think it's a little bit warm, if I'm very honest with you. So I'm dropping a little bit my temperature to 5250 Kelvin. And the next part I'm going to move to is HSL color. Now, the HSL color slider is very, very tricky. It's kind of a zone that is a little bit scary to go to, but if you think about it, it's not that difficult. Let me show you. So here you can choose basically your hue, saturation, and luminance for each color. Now you might be wondering, what is hue, what is saturation, what is luminance? Well, hue is basically changing the way red looks. So for example, right now red looks red, right? But if we change it, red looks pink or red looks orange. I know, it's kind of fun to play with it. So that's how you get a lot of those moody tones that you might see on Instagram, where everything like the greens are not green, the sky is gray when it's blue. That's where people do it. Look, if I were to change my blue, I could put it turquoise, or I could put it pink, or magenta. I mean, you can do everything you want here. So it's really up to you to play with what you like. The saturation is fairly obvious. I think you know what it means. It means how saturated is your red. You can make it super saturated, which can look cool a little bit in that case if you want to pump up a little bit the reds, or you can kill it completely. And then luminance is basically how bright is that color in your image, okay? So here we've got the luminance to 0, but what happens if we bring it down? Well, our red goes really black, okay? And if we bring it up, our red goes really light. So very important tool, HSLColor slider. Now, you should have the same whichever software you're using. It's even available on the mobile app. So this is one part you want to go through, and depending on the vision you have and the aesthetics you have, you're going to change it differently. Personally, on that image, what I'm going to do is bump up my red saturation. I'm going to make it a little bit more magenta, but a tiny bit, and then I'm going to drop a little bit the red. You will see why after, because I'm gonna make special adjustments later. Also, actually no, you know what, I'm gonna bring up a little bit the luminance on the reds. There we go, because I feel like my subject is lost a little bit. The orange, I don't think I'm gonna change much. You can just slide it left and right just to see what's happening on your image. Orange looks good for me. I don't need to change anything right now on my orange. Yellow, where is the yellow here? Oh, you can see we've got some yellow here. We've got some yellow on the left. Yellow also looks good. There is not too much information I want to do here. I might kill it a little bit. Or what happens if I bump it up? No, I'm just gonna drop it a little bit. The greens, I don't think there are many greens here except on that plant. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna desaturate a little bit the green, because I feel personally that greens are a little bit distracting in images. They maybe get too punchy. So, and then I'm gonna drop the luminance for the greens. It's just my rule of thumb right now. Aqua, do we have aqua in that image? We actually don't have any aqua. Nothing changes in that image, so you don't have to touch it, especially if you're doing it slider by slider. You can check if there is blue or aqua in your image. So now clearly we have some blues. Now you don't want to bring it, I don't want to bring it to turquoise because I don't think it's gonna look great. But what I want to do is I want to make my blue tiny bit desaturated, and I want to make them darker. I kind of like dark blues. That's just my personal preference. Now the purple, you do what you want, guys. It's really up to you, purple and magenta. I'm not gonna touch those two right now. That's all I'm gonna do. I'm gonna look at my image before after. Okay, we've got some punch in that image. It clearly changed. And now I'm gonna go back to my original panels here and see if I want to change something more. So I'm gonna tweak a little bit more because I feel like we're getting somewhere, but not exactly. I might want to bump up the shadows a little bit more. And what I realized from that image already is that the left and right of the image is not conducive to really seeing just the subject. So tomorrow I'll show you how to use all those tools to really emphasize our subject and bring it to something like that after. So you'll see it's gonna be a lot of local adjustments, but for now, let's keep our image like that. I think we're pretty happy with it. I'm pretty happy with it so far. I just think we can do better in the future, but let me see. I might want to bring that down a little bit more. There we go. There we go. And as you can see, I keep tweaking and tweaking as I'm going. I always go back to my sliders and change it after. There's no like perfect rule for anything right now. I go in that order and then go back to it just to adjust how I like it. And I always look at before, after. It gives me a good idea of what I'm doing.